Once again, I want to invite you to have a conversation with the persons next to you. And those of you who are at home, I want you to either converse with those with you or to just pause. So I invite you to turn to someone near you and say, "Hello, my name is Chris. And was there a moment this week that you experienced God?" It might have been a sunrise. It could have been your spouse's hug. It could have been your kids' music, Christmas concert. You received a postcard from someone. "Hello, my name is Chris. And when did I encounter God this week?" Turn to someone maybe that you don't know and say, "Hello, my name is Chris. And during this past week, I experienced God." And when you both have shared something, please be seated. The scripture tonight invites us into that place of Elizabeth and Mary in which they encounter each other, both pregnant, both in an awkward situation of not quite knowing how this all happened, but in that encounter, they experienced God. So I invite us to ponder for a moment how we encounter one another. There are moments on television, whether it's a game show or a music store show, when someone comes out and you can tell by either the person's face, the judge's attitude, that they've kind of judged that person already. Why is she here? Or who let him in? Or why didn't the screeners get rid of that person? Or a sense of joy, and there's a judgment that's made, and then someone gets up and either tells a joke or they play the game right and they win all the money or whatever it is, and the person will often say, "I didn't judge you correctly." And we could go into a room and we could see someone at work or at the office or in line at the market or someplace, and just because they have their hair in a different style or they have a religious hat on that says they're different than you or I, or maybe they're speaking another language, or maybe it's someone at work that we've had an attitude with, them toward us or we toward them. Whenever there's the moment of encounter, we have the option to bring up all of our stuff, whether it's a prejudice or a racism or sexism, whatever it might be, to either put that upon that other person, or we can say hello and greet them. Here are two women, an elderly woman and a younger woman, both pregnant, one saying that she's never seen a man, and the other saying, "I'm too old." And something happened in their lives that God encountered them, and that has transformed human history. They could have judged each other. They could have written each other's off. They could have said, "Oh, she's my cousin Mary, there she goes again." Or, "Cousin Elizabeth, she's elderly, but she must be doing something going on here." All those judgments could have been put upon them. But we have one of the great prayers in which the encounter allows them to see and experience God. That's not just for them in history and scripture, it's for us. How do I encounter other people? How can I make that moment a moment to encounter God? It could be with nature. Oh, it's just another sunset. Or it's like, oh, wow, isn't that an amazing sunset? Or it could be that encounter with someone that all of a sudden, I was out in the back and there was a young man at working with Caltech or whatever, and amazing scientific kind of thing coming from young people. Or we can just write them off and say, oh, they don't know anything. We are invited this week to ponder how we greet one another. On both of my phones at St. Camillus and at the county hospital, the first word that people will hear when they pick up the phone, when the phone is picked up, is blessings. I want people to hear that first. Blessings. This morning at Juvenile Hall Mass, when the young men and women come out, the first thing I say to them is blessings. How can we encounter people in which we recognize their dignity and who they are? One of the struggles with anyone, any country, including our own border dynamic, is that we tend to assume the negative about that other person that's coming across. So we assume that people are breaking in to steal, or we assume they're at the border because they're coming to do harm. And yet we also know that people are coming with many gifts, many talents. How many of our immigrant people come with PhDs, with histories of being creative artists, with histories of being creative, with creating things out of food or sculpture or some other form of creativity. And if the border is completely closed to your ancestors and mine, we wouldn't have been blessed by that. How do we welcome people? Mary and Elizabeth give us that example tonight, that Jesus invites us to greet one another with a sense of blessing and praise and non-judgment, and a sense that the divine is present in the other. One of the great gifts of this community is this wonderful manger scene. It's this place where you almost feel compelled to come inside it. They're almost our size. And we're invited to encounter this Joseph guy who wanted to be a stand-up person. Now his girlfriend, his fiancée, is with a child. How did he welcome her? The scripture says he was ready to divorce her quietly, at least. But this was apparently his love. They had fallen in love at some point. They were engaged. How did they welcome each other? He eventually, inspired by his heart, or an angel, however you might want to say it, he was inspired to treat her with the same love he had with her before he was understanding that she was pregnant. And Mary, who could have said, I don't want to be a part of any of this, but she encountered God in the Spirit and the angel, and she said, yes, I will do what you want, O God. We have these wonderful animals that sometimes get kicked out, but during this Holy Week, how do we get blessed when we see an animal, a dog or a cat or a bird or whatever you have at home or in your neighborhood? How do we encounter the presence of God? Because in the manger scene all over the world, there's always lambs and sheep and cattle, and we have camels on their way over here. The animals of God, how do we encounter and see them as a blessing of God? And then we have these poor folks, the shepherds. Clearly, they were the people that would come to the food kitchen here on Monday or Tuesday and want something to feed themselves. And they were pushed out. But in this moment of incarnation, the birth of Jesus, we have shepherds that come in from the field to behold the birth of Jesus. So as we prepare for this last few hours before we either come back tomorrow night for Christmas Eve Mass or Christmas Day Mass, may we be open to how we encounter others. Do we see them with the eyes of God? Do we look at them without that judgment, but with that sense of, where is the God in that other person? How can I allow that person's gifts to be evoked? Whether we're at home or whether we're working, whether we're shopping tomorrow, whether we're just hanging out with family, whatever you're doing, I just invite us to be aware of the welcome. How do we welcome one another? And we ask Mary and Elizabeth to inspire us, to move us to that place where they see the beautiful, the powerful, and the God moment. How can this be, is the prayer, that the mother of my Lord would come to me? How can it be that I am able to behold the sunrise and sunset, and someone else who's blind does not see? How is it possible that I can see in this person that I made a vow to many years ago beauty and holiness and amazement? How can I see, oh God, in this teenager that tends to say no to me a lot and writes me off and keeps himself involved with other technical things? How can I see, how can I behold in this young person the presence of God? And how can I see in this mother or father or someone that keeps telling me no and telling me this or that, how can I see in that person the presence of God? The Scripture invites us into that powerful experience of Elizabeth and Mary. How is it possible that the mother of my Lord should come unto me? May we be open to the greetings, and may those greetings transform how we experience Christmas and New Year's this year.